Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's Tuesday, April the 8th, and I am going to call our meeting to order this evening at 6:30 p.m. We're going to, as an announcement, of course, this meeting was moved from April 1st to today's date due to the ice storm and to ensure that the public would be able to participate in this evening's deliberations and discussions. We're going to start with a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, our land acknowledgement. The municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga Anishinaabeg traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as rights holders and stewards of the lands and waters on which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those who make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Moving on to the next item. Disclosures of pecuniary interest. I note that none were received prior to this evening's meeting. Are there any to disclose at the council table? Seeing none, moving on to item number 3, which is our correspondence. Item 3.1, Intermunicipal Task Force on Housing and Homelessness regarding Northumberland Housing Solutions Workshop Summary and Recommendations. And I'm going to ask Councillor Clare to introduce the matter.
Thank you, Mayor. Just really pleased to share the recommendations from the Intermunicipal Task Force's Housing Solutions Workshop. It was a day-long event that brought together municipal planners, building officials, realtors, private sector builders, nonprofit housing providers, finance folks, your lenders, all in a room with the municipal task force members, who are all councillors across the county, to look at what are the pain points for getting housing built in our communities and what we can agree collectively should be done to streamline how we get housing built. I think it was a really productive day and lots of great ideas. Our next steps, of course, will be to prioritize which of the recommendations we feel we can advance together. And we'll be looking at that. And of course, looking a lot at our director of planning for her input on which of these recommendations make the most sense for Port Hope. But I think it's an excellent start and looking forward to diving in. And I'll ask Councillor Todd, who's also co-chair of the task force, to speak as well.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly agree. I think it was, if you get a chance, I would highly recommend you take a look at the report. It recommends a lot of system changes and comes from sort of the position of, what we've done in the past is not working and what do we need to change. And so what I really like about the outcome of this day, and certainly what it paints for the future, is if we're going to look at housing and homelessness and all states of the way in which people live, then we have to start looking at changing some of the systems and the way in which we approach things. So I'm very excited as to what doors it's going to open. But highly recommend you take a look at the report. I think you'll find it really interesting.
Thank you, Councillor Clare and Councillor Todd. I would echo, I would extend my heartfelt congratulations to the work of the task force for the event and for the recommendations and the fulsome report. And I do want to also note that this was brought forward to the Northumberland County Council, and I had ensured that I asked how the recommendations and priorities would be integrated into the decision-making and priorities of the county moving forward to ensure that there's a coordinated response at all different levels of government. And I have been assured by the CAO and staff that they will be integrating the recommendations moving forward. So we'll keep the feet to the fire on that one. But thank you very much for this very important work. Moving on to item number 4, items for consideration. 4.1. Oh, yes. Of course, we are going to receive this. I was already moving on to the actionable plans, but we do at first glance need to receive the correspondence for information. So can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Darrell, seconded by Councillor Adam. All in favor? That is passed unanimously, and hopefully we'll move from information to action very quickly on this file. Moving on to item number 4, items for consideration. 4.1, presentation by Representatives Ickley and Report WE 0425, Report Hope Sustainable Future, Community Climate Action Plan. And I'm going to turn it over to Director Davidson to make the introductions for this report.
Good evening. We're very pleased to bring forward the draft Community Climate Action Plan for public consultation. With us this evening is a few members of the Environmental Advisory Committee, and Andrew Orson of the Environmental Advisory Committee would actually like to say a few words and introduce the consultant.
Good evening. So my name is Andrew Soren. I'm one of the members of your Environmental Advisory Committee. So part of our committee's mandate has been to facilitate the development of a community climate action plan. And our aim was to ensure that this plan reflects the interests and concerns of the citizens of Port Hope. And to that end, the plan that you're going to hear about tonight has been developed based on a significant amount of consultation and input from different residents and interest groups in the municipality. So I'd like to introduce Adler, who will proceed with the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you for the introduction. And if we could just ask you to adjust the microphone so everybody can hear you very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Andrew. It's very nice to be here with you today to present the work of the Climate Action Plan. My name is Adler Gross. I'm the Climate Mitigation Program Lead at ICLEI Canada. So for this presentation, I was going to give you a quick introduction, a little bit of brief project background before I jump into a summary of the development of the Climate Action Plan and the results of the community engagements before going into next steps and then questions. So brief introduction, ICLEI Canada is a national nonprofit. We deliver capacity building and consulting services to municipalities across the country. We're part of an international network, although we work independently in Canada. The network gives us access to knowledge sharing opportunities and experiences from other municipalities across the world. The consulting team here was myself, Megan Meany, the executive director, as well as our support staff, Pavlos Hawkins and Kristen Ma. So the Climate Action Plan was developed in response to the climate emergency that was declared by Council in 2022, recognizing that the local impacts of climate change need urgent action to prevent further harm and address any further damages. So this plan positions Port Hope joining municipalities across Ontario, Canada, and internationally that are taking action on climate, including at the county level here in Northumberland County, as well as your immediate neighbors, Peterborough, Durham Region, Prince Edward County, and Kingston. The plan outlines 17 strategies for more efficient energy use, environmental stewardship, waste reduction in order to achieve emission reductions, and is based on community priorities and feedback that was gathered over the course of the project. The impacts of climate change are increasing in recent years. The last 10 years have seen consecutively been the hottest years on record, and the climate projections for this region indicate more days of extreme heat and cold weather going forward. So in order to limit the severity of these damages, we must reduce our GHG emissions to reduce further impacts and to preserve prosperity for future generations. So this is, as I mentioned, a climate mitigation plan. As you can see here, this slide is the difference between climate mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is the first step, addressing and preventing those hazards, whereas adaptation is the next step and addressing how do we live with these impacts and adapt to the impacts of the climate change. So climate action is not just about reducing emissions. It's about using resources more efficiently and creating healthier communities. So there's many co-benefits associated with climate action. First of all, as I mentioned before, minimizing the negative impacts. So the short-term decisions we make today will have long-term impacts. It also provides many opportunities to reduce energy costs. Many of the actions in the plan are about increasing energy efficiency and keeping energy dollars in the community. Most of the money we spend on energy leaves the community. And the energy efficiency and renewable energy actions in the plan provide opportunities to keep that money circulating in the community and provide more economic opportunities in the energy sector. It also increases energy security and energy resilience and insulates Port Hope from future energy price increases. The active transportation and nature-based solutions in the plan also have many health and co-benefits associated with them due to more healthy activity, opportunities for activity, access to nature, and improved air quality. So the development of the plan involves extensive stakeholder engagement, including a public survey that was open for the summer and fall last year. We also held 8 focus groups with community organizations around key theme areas such as agriculture, nature, accessibility, parks and recreation. There was a youth engagement activity that was delivered by teachers, which gave youth the opportunity to express their views. And there was also a public open house that was held last year in May. All told, there was approximately 300 community members engaged across all the different activities. And I wanted to highlight for you some of the engagement results. Some of the priority areas that were identified were waste reduction, circular economy initiatives, support for local businesses and local food, as well as farmers, as well as protecting farmland and natural assets. So those are the priorities that are reflected in the actions in the plan. One of the key findings was a need for more collaboration and communication amongst the community and the municipality. And the implementation plan outlines some recommendations for how we can improve those processes. One of the things we found in engagements is there's a lot of great work and a lot of initiatives already going on in Port Hope. It's just a matter of people knowing about what's happening and providing more opportunities, as I said, for collaboration. The project started with a baseline greenhouse gas inventory. So as you can see here, I'll just give a brief overview that the largest sources of emissions and energy use are the transportation sectors and the building sector, residential, commercial, institutional, and industrial. The primary sources of the emissions are use of energy, electricity, and natural gas for heating and powering buildings, and gasoline and diesel for transportation. We did some business as usual projections. So what is the future energy and emissions look like if no action is taken, no additional action is taken? We expect to see an increase of 27% in energy use and 22% in emissions by 2050 if no additional action is taken. And energy costs are expected to increase by 46% under a high cost scenario, so highlighting the need for more energy saving actions. We then developed a decarbonization model to outline a pathway to net zero by 2050. It outlines energy reductions required to achieve this goal, assuming a steady state of adoption to 2050. Based on the modeling, there's a suggested target of midterm target of 46% reduction from 2018 levels by 2035. And I'll go into on the next slides the actions here that are represented here. But as you can see, many of them have to do with increasing energy efficiency in buildings and transportation as well. So the Climate Action Plan focuses on 6 key areas, which I'll go over in the next slide, and has 17 overarching strategies to address these that address waste, natural assets, and energy use. Each strategy is accompanied with supporting and enabling components. It includes implementation timelines, relative costs, funding opportunities, monitoring metrics, and co-benefits. So here are the key areas here. I'll highlight each of them briefly. In the building sector, the strategies have to do with education and awareness about opportunities for improving home and business energy efficiency. There's a lot of different funding opportunities out there, and it's quite a complicated process to navigate. So providing some trusted sources and guidelines for how to go about that can go a long way. There's also a lot of low low cost, easy to implement actions that can be done that can produce a lot of savings over the long term. There is some actions on how to establish guidelines for new buildings to be built as efficient as possible, to promote new renewable energy opportunities, and to collaborate with industrial sector to continue energy efficiency measures, which they are already leading on. In the transportation sector, it's very much about improving options for transportation, Port Hope, and creating safer cycling and walking routes, investigating options for other and funding opportunities for public transit, supporting low emission vehicle adoption through build out of EV charger network, as well as transportation demand management initiatives that include carpooling, rideshare, and car sharing services. The community design and land use planning sector has to do with developing recommendations for policies that ensure high density mixed use developments and that include complete communities components in them and are walkable and accessible for all. Agriculture and local food systems have to do with working with farmers to establish networks for knowledge sharing and communication that build off of a lot of the great initiatives and sustainable agricultural work that's already being done, and educating and the community and building more connection for local food growers to connect with local businesses and residents and schools to establish local food hubs, for example. Environmental stewardship was a key area, and we heard from the community that protecting Port Hope's natural spaces and prime agricultural farmland is very important. And so we have some suggestions and recommendations in there for how to strengthen policies and public consultation processes going forward, as well as working with naturalist groups and hiking group and cycling groups to increase awareness and connection to natural spaces through educational walks, natural history, signage are some of the examples. And then in the waste sector, there was a lot of support for developing circular economy initiatives and increasing waste diversion by one of the means is supporting local businesses and finding ways to better reuse items and establish tool libraries and basically a sharing economy that doesn't rely on so much new throughput all the time. And then I'll jump into the implementation plan here. The implementation plan is a community-led, municipally supported model. We've proposed a community climate action working group model here around 4 key areas. The groups here would meet regularly to share knowledge, update each other on current initiatives, and work with the Environmental Advisory Committee and staff leads to implement the actions in the climate action plan. The focus groups that we held already expressed interest in participating in these types of working groups. So the next steps would be to formalize these and set these up and invite participants to be part of these groups. The next stages for the plan are to put it up for a suggested 30-day community review period, at which point we will incorporate and revise the climate action plan for approval and adoption to council by end of May. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to council now for any questions or comments. Councillor Todd.
All right. Thank you very much. And I found this really interesting to read through. Not a surprise to council, but I'm going to ask a question about metrics and so on. So at what point in the plan, as we're building out strategies and so on, do we start putting metrics to this and start measuring success so that we know that we're actually making progress?
Yeah, we've included in the plan an implementation table with suggestion metrics for each of the strategies. So it's basically as soon as you start to implement these actions, you can begin to track progress of this.
Great. And so then how frequently should this be updated? So as we're making progress along this line, we're probably going to want to measure greenhouse gas emissions again. So how frequently would this typically be measured again?
We find usually a 5-year period usually strikes a good balance between not not being too much effort. Doing a yearly update can be quite onerous. So 5 years strikes a nice balance there. But you may want to either do annual or biannual midterm kind of updates on progress, not necessarily a full greenhouse gas inventory, but just kind of progress updates at a regular 1 or 2 year intervals.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, okay, Councillor Clare.
Just to say, I'm thrilled to have this finally coming forward. It's been a long time coming, and just to appreciate your efforts of your team and all the Environmental Advisory Committee members who contributed and all the community members. I look forward to seeing the final feedback and the opportunity to adopt this later this spring.
So I'm going to follow up with just a couple of questions. I noted that on one of your slides, you had pointed out that there needs to be a little bit more collaboration with municipal staff and the community. And we've also had many discussions around this table recently about better coordination of policy efforts and services and staff positions with the county. And it strikes me that work on climate change and the environment is something that should be very closely coordinated with county to realize cost efficiencies as well as the best return on efforts. And I'm wondering, to what extent during this process did you actually consult with Northumberland County and some of the efforts that are underway there? And also, in terms of your recommendation for a working group, I really like the model of the intermunicipal group. Why wouldn't we want to explore that for something like this particular issue, given that climate change doesn't have boundaries between our different municipalities? It's definitely something that I think could be very valuable for a county-wide effort, and that way we can be coordinated and we're not all reinventing the wheel at the same time.
Thank you. I engaged with the environmental coordinator at Northumberland County to provide an opportunity to review the actions as well as provide any input and look for any synergies there. So the environmental coordinator is very much aware of the plan and looking forward to collaborating on implementation of this going forward. I think an intermunicipal group is a great suggestion. Honestly, there is a great network of municipalities across Ontario. We're all in the same stages. We can all learn from each other. And there's a lot of experience out there that we can benefit from. So that's definitely something that we can consider working into the implementation plan.
Councillor Clare.
Just in part answering your question as well, there is sort of an unofficial group that exists across the county. Just prior to starting on the process here in Port Hope, the former chair of the Environmental Advisory Committee and myself joined up with representatives from the equivalent committees and councils with the other 6 lower tiers and participated in a program called the Climate Transitions Cohort with Tamarack Institute. And we do regularly liaise. So they have this draft report has been circulated to those interested, because I know some of the other, as you rightly point out, we share an ecosystem, and I know other municipalities that are smaller don't necessarily have the same resources. Will definitely be interested in piggybacking on efforts and learning from efforts here, so that they don't have to duplicate efforts and develop their own plans. Makes total sense.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from around the table? Okay, we're going to move forward then to the motion is listed on the agenda that the council receive Port Hope Sustainable Future Community Action Plan, and that council direct staff to post the plan for a 30-day review period, with the final plan to be brought back directly to council for adoption following the public comment period. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Clare, seconded by Councillor Less. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to report 4.2 WE0525 Ministry of Transportation Dedicated Gas Tax Funding. Does staff have anything further to add before council considers this report?
There are two agreements in this report. One is for the 2024 funding, and those funds have already been received, and we anticipate receiving the funding for 2025, and they both have been accounted for in the budget already. This is really just a technicality.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for the director? Okay, so the recommended motion is on the listed agenda for this item. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Moving on to 4.3, report ES0625, PHAI tree removal, tree planting process. Does staff have anything further that they would like to add before council considers the report?
Yeah, staying with the theme of carbon sinks. We're looking at actually, this was brought to council in 2021 originally. Oh, sorry, not close enough. This was originally brought to council in 2021. The amendment at that time, council directed staff to take it back to the EAC for a comment and review. So these their comments in conjunction with some back and forth with CNL have been incorporated into this amendment to the municipal tree planting and protection policy. I think this is going to address the gaps that currently exist between the policy and PHAI's activities. With the virtual tree bank approach, the MPH will come to a consensus on the number of trees being replanted and the number of trees going into the bank based on restoration designs. And it basically focused on the number of trees being replaced versus the size of the tree being removed and the number of trees being replaced. And yeah, that was about the gist of their comments. Yeah, I think this will address the gaps, get us what we want.
Thank you for that highlighted summary. Any questions or comments from around the table? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. And I'm not sure if I missed it because there was a few reports here. Do we discuss what happens if trees are planted and they don't succeed? Is that in this policy?
Yeah, so in lieu of a warranty, they actually add 10% more tree volume to the tree bank. So we do kind of account for a loss of trees that way.
And I have a bit of a follow-up on that is, do we know statistically what percentage of trees fail based on previous records of planting similar trees in our municipality and others, especially taking into account what's most appropriate for our area?
Yeah, let's go have a walk around Lions Park. Yeah, there's a few up there. I would say that around probably 20% would be lost up at Lions Park right now, but those were planted really close, and some of them, you know, a lot of tamaracks and stuff like that that just didn't take. Yeah, I can look at getting some better numbers though, like as far as project wide.
So then a follow-up is 10% enough of a cushion to accommodate for the failure?
Yeah, I think going forward, that number, you know, will have to be looked at as we do more planting.
So what's the earliest time period that we could adjust that figure based on experience?
I think actually Lions Park is going to be a good kind of baseline for that. Once we go up there and have a look at what actually survived from that planting, we'll have a better idea.
And sorry, I'm keeping to follow up on this, but then will we get a report back to council on how we're faring there so that we can make a potential adjustment?
Yes, we will bring that back to council depending on what we are seeing in the field.
Any other questions or Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. And this is just a follow-up on the same topic, but getting a little technical. So for an example, across from the wastewater treatment plant, I believe trees were planted there several times and continued to not make it. So how many attempts are made before we decide maybe this isn't the solution? And is the multiple attempts factored into this 20%?
Yeah, and I'm not aware of how many times they've replanted those ones across from the wastewater plant. I could look into that. Maybe it's a selection issue down there, not planting the right trees. Yeah, but we'll have to have a better look at that one particularly.
Any other questions or comments from around the table? The recommended motion is listed on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Clare. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Moving on to report 4.4, report PS 0525, Fire Station 2 replacement project update. Does staff have anything further to add before council considers the report? Director Williams.
I don't. You just have to listen to me talk. No PowerPoint today. So I just want to thank you and Mayor, member of council. I just like to take some time today to speak to all of you in relation to.
Your PA system is not working, you realize. And it's quite irritating having people make the effort to make a presentation, but they cannot be heard well. Is there something that can be done about that?
Thank you for letting us know that you're not hearing it. Let's try another microphone at the podium. And yes, we are installing a new system this summer, which was approved in the budget of last year. So there is going to be a new system put into the council chambers. But for now, let's see if we can replace the microphone and see and just check in with everybody in the audience that you can hear Director Williams clearly.
So if I speak a little right into the microphone, is that better?
Yes.
Right into the mic. Perfect. Excellent. We'll change that. Excellent. Please let me know if you can't hear me. I appreciate it. So I'd like to take time to speak to you today in a matter of critical importance to the safety and well-being of our community. I stand before you today as the Fire Chief of the Municipality of Port Hope, representing the dedicated men and women who serve with our fire service, who risk their lives every day to protect our residents, businesses, and visitors. I'm here to discuss the urgent need for the replacement of Fire Station 2. As you know, Station 2 has served the community faithfully for many years. But the reality is that it no longer meets the operational needs of our fire service or the community that it serves. The station is outdated, undersized, and unable to accommodate the growing demands placed upon it. Some of the many challenges that we currently face related to Fire Station 2 are the following. The current Fire Station 2 was built by the members of Port Hope Fire and Emergency Services in the 1970s. It is too small, and that was a different era, one where emergency response looked very different than it does today. This was prior to the current growth of our municipality and the dramatic increase of traffic on Highway 401 and the rail lines that run through Port Hope, as well as the increase in specialized industry in our community as well. The current station was constructed for the needs of the community in the 1970s and is too small for today's firefighting apparatus and equipment. Our vehicles barely fit inside the building, and there's no room for future growth at the site due to the zoning and development restrictions as the fire station was constructed in the floodplain, which in our current zoning bylaw is not permitted for obvious reasons. The current Fire Station 2 is not in compliance with the current ADOA requirements, as well as requirements outlined in the Occupational and Safety Act, Section 21 guidance notes, and is also not in compliance with current NFPA standards related to numerous aspects related to firefighter health and safety, including but not limited to decontamination procedures to help prevention of cancer. And as we all know, firefighters are 40% more likely to be diagnosed with cancer than the average person due to the nature of our work. These deficiencies put our firefighters at greater risk and in turn affect the ability to protect this community that we serve. We need to invest in the health and safety of our firefighters and ensure their health and safety just as they do for our residents each and every day. The building has exceeded its functional lifespan, and continuing to maintain and repair is neither cost-effective nor a long-term solution. In 2022, the council, not this council, but the municipal council, approved the Fire Master Plan for our municipality, which recommended the replacement of Fire Station 2 as a priority for the fire service, and something I undertook when I started with the municipality shortly thereafter its implementation. And since I've been started with Port Hope, I've been working for almost 3 years to see this project to fruition and to implement the recommendations of the plan that was approved by council at that time. Port Hope Fire and Emergency Services has seen a dramatic increase for calls for service since 2022 when that fire master plan was first developed. In 2022, we'd seen an average of just over 500 calls per year. In 2024, we responded to 724 calls for service, the most on record. In February of this year, we experienced a 57% increase in calls for service year over year. Our station must be equipped to handle higher call volumes, more complex emergencies, and the evolving risks to our community. As we have seen in the past week, emergency situations are becoming more and more of the norm. And we need to invest in our fire service and the men and women that serve, and its required infrastructure to ensure we can continue to keep our community safe. The replacement of Fire Station 2 project will also be utilized as our emergency operations center, which now is being housed in a small room in the Canton building. We need and can do better. Our replacement Fire Station 2 is not just a necessity. It is a strategic investment in the health and safety and resilience of Port Hope, all of the municipality. As a patch on our shoulder does not say Ward 1 or Ward 2, does not say Hope Township or Port Hope. It says municipality of Port Hope. And I want to make that very clear. An example of that is a fire that we had earlier today at the Beamish House. We had firefighters respond from all 3 stations across our municipality. There are no borders for our fire service. We protect the residents of this entire municipality with pride. Tonight, I'm seeking council's support and financial commitment towards the construction and replacement of Fire Station 2, as a project is based on a comprehensive needs assessment that prioritizes efficiency, firefighter safety, and long-term sustainability. This was done through the Fire Master Plan's development and implementation, as well as through community consultations, surveys, information sessions, which have occurred over the past 3 years. This also included station location analysis based on data collection and analysis, which identified the area of 55 Fox Road as the most suitable location for Fire Station 2 project to be located. I recognize the financial considerations involved in such a project. I'm not blind to that. I've been working to identify and explore funding opportunities, such as current grant opportunities. And as outlined in the report before you, there's currently a provincial grant available that would potentially assist in funding this project with millions of dollars. And in 2023, Clarington Fire Rescue obtained the same grant to assist in one of their capital projects, which is currently underway. This grant would assist in funding aspects of the fire station related to training and development of our fire and emergency services personnel. Grants that can be utilized to support the construction of fire stations are rare. And this is a great opportunity for Port Hope to get grant funding to assist with the important community project. However, the longer we delay this project, which I believe we all agree is much needed and overdue, the more costly it becomes, not only in financial terms, but a risk to the public safety. As outlined in the report, the replacement of Fire Station 2 has been identified need for the community for 15 years. In 2014, 11 years ago, it was planned to be constructed as part of the police station capital project. And the cost associated with the fire station aspect of that build at the time was just over $2 million, 11 years ago. Since my involvement with this project in 2022, the municipality has invested over $620,000 in conducting various studies, obtaining site plans, approvals, developing the design drawings for this project. And as of last month, I was able to obtain a Class D estimate for the project, which I apologize. In 2023, the estimate we received was a Class D estimate, and it was approximately $9 million. I just received an updated Class B estimate, which is plus minus 10%. And as part of the design process, the estimated cost for the project is now approximately $11 million. This means that the project has increased over $98,000 a month since my original report to council in 2023. In speaking to the requirements for the replacement of this fire hall. While there's potential for Port Hope to become a host community for OPG in the future, I think it's important to note that the variables associated with this project, if it becomes finalized, are vast, and the timelines associated with the project and potential impacts on our community are now an unknown. What is known is that Fire Station 2 needs to be replaced and should have been replaced many years ago. Any future potential investment and development opportunities that OPG may bring will change many things for the good in our municipality, including the role of fire emergency services, and at that time, a further evaluation of the requirements related to our fire service and the levels of service that we provide our community, including any potential investment with OPG, would have to be investigated. The timelines associated with this project, like I said, are truly unknown at this time. And some estimates that I've received in relation to the project, if and when it comes to fruition, are between 10 to 15 years to complete. Time which Fire Station 2 does not have. To conclude, this replacement is needed to ensure we can carry out our current levels of service to our community, with the potential for growth incorporated in the project to support future growth and requirements for fire service related to training, equipment, and facility space. Your support is critical in ensuring that Port Hope has a fire service that is properly equipped to serve our community, both now and in the future. Investing in a new Fire Station 2 is just not an expense, an investment in public safety, emergency preparedness, and the well-being of our residents. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director. And I'll now turn it over to Council for questions and comments. I'm going to start with Councillor Less.
Thanks, Jason, for for the presentation, and a lot of what you said I agree with. The Station 2 is outmoded, it's small, there's no expansion capability. But what I wrestle with, and I've got about 7 points here, so bear with me, is this a short or medium-term solution? Is the Fox Road location going to be suitable for any future expansion for the training facility? Is what you propose a viable training center longer term, considering what we may end up doing in the future? Are we better to wait for more information from OPG? That's always something in the air. If we don't take advantage of the grants in this economic climate and what we're facing, I think they're going to disappear. So that's something we have to consider. And we know that development is coming, that we are building houses, that development charges will eventually hit our balance sheet, and that'll be a positive for us. So the debenture will not be as formidable once we start getting these development charges. So there's that whole bunch of things that has nothing to do with whether you need a new station or where it is, other than is Fox Road the right location? Thank you.
Do you want to go ahead and tackle those, and then we'll just continue on with questions and comments?
I do. Is that working? Doesn't sound like it is. Is that working? No.
How's that? There we go. I can hear it. Sounds like I'm emceeing a wedding now. So I did make some notes and through the chair to answer your questions, Councillor Andrew. So short or long term, this station does incorporate aspects for future growth within the fire service and with our community. You can see that we've expanded the number of bays, the training area, the emergency operations center, including our training tower as well. That's going to be utilized by not only Port Hope Fire and Emergency Services. Our training will be shared with Port Hope Police Service, and the training aspects of the hall will be utilized by other fire services within Northumberland County. There is, based on the nature of the construction of this project, the potential for future expansion, meaning a second level on the fire hall if required. I believe currently it is a viable training center to serve its purposes for what we need. We've incorporated, like I said, a 3-story training tower, which is going to be part of the grant funding, which we're applying for just less than $4 million to support the construction of this project. I believe I spoke to OPG, so I'm not going to speak to that. Grants, I couldn't agree more. I've been in this business for a while, and grants that come along that support the development of the construction of fire halls are seldom. And I do agree that they're become few and far between. So I think not applying for this grant to support this much needed project would be a disservice to the community. Development charges. This current project is available for over $4 million in development charge funding, and I couldn't agree, and that is included in my report, is a very important aspect because that is an additional potential funding source along with other provincial and federal funding sources, which are over $2 million just in 2026. So if we take a look, like I said, in the body of the report, just to summarize for the folks that are sitting here, if all potential funding sources that we get are utilized for the fire hall, which I realize is probably not a reality, it's just under $900,000 left that's not unfunded. That would be on the tax levy.
Any other, Councillor Todd?
Thank you very much. I agree in many ways with what Councillor Less was bringing up. I am wholeheartedly behind your justification as to why we need a new station. I do have a couple of concerns, and I certainly have some questions. My concern is also around the location. Recognizing that the report that came forward identifying that location may be outdated, and also knowing that we're already going through some additional studies related to the OPG project. What would happen should those reports reveal there needs to be a fire station in a different location? And then we've already started down a path of building one, and just to find out we got the location wrong. And so one of my questions is, if we were to defer this decision until after we've had that growth readiness study done, what implications would that have on this project? So that's one question. Second question I have is around the grant itself. So I'd like to know a little bit more about what's tied to the grant. What's the timing that's associated with it if we are going to get the funds? So should we be successful? Is there a window in which we have to use those funds? The other thing I'm curious about is the grant tied to a location, so that if we were to shift the location in the window in which the grant is available, is that still okay? So I'd like to learn a little bit more about what shows up in that grant.
You, Councillor. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, I did my best to make notes. Just if I don't cover it off, please bring it, because I do have the answer, I promise you. In relation to the location, it is the correct location for today and for the foreseeable future. Now, obviously, if we have a investment or a project such as Wesleyville take place, the requirements on the host community's obligation under any type of MOU and agreement related to fire and emergency services support would be dictated by what the project encompasses. And in conversations, very preliminary conversations, it's going to be solely based on number of variables that are associated with the actual generating plan in itself and what they're able to do and what they need to rely upon us to support. And right now that data isn't available because they don't know the scope and of the actual project. So the requirements for any type of emergency service support are now unknown. The location or proximity of an additional station is unknown. The requirement to have full-time fire department is unknown. But what I do know is today, 5 years and 10 years from now, Fire Station 2 needs to be replaced. It should have been replaced 15 years ago. And today, in 5 years and 10 years from now, 55 Fox Road is the right place. There's been data collection and analysis performed based on the station location. It gave us basically a range of where the fire station could be located due to the fact that we already own the property and it's serviced, and all those good points I brought forward almost 3 years ago about why we should be putting it there and why it should have probably been put there in 2014, to be quite frank. Further supports the placement at 55 Fox Road. There's a cost savings. So there's a lot of things that support its location at 55 Fox Road. And I would just make sure I can cover that off. In relation to the grant, stipulations to the grant are if we receive the grant and upon getting that funding agreement, we'd have 12 months to start the project. We'd have 5 years to complete the project. Start the project means shovel in the ground. 5 years is complete, right? So we do have quite a timeline. One of the caveats for the application for this grant is a minimum 40% design, which we have. So we are ready to apply for this grant. So the design is based on the location at 55 Fox Road. So when you say, are we tied to that location? We're tied to the design that we have to submit, which ties us to 55 Fox Road.
Follow up, Councillor Todd.
Yeah, thank you. 2 follow-ups. So I totally appreciate that we, going back to the OBG, totally appreciate we don't have the data and we may not know the that kind of information for the next little while. But we're in that process, and I think we have a 1-year window. Is that right? Looking at the CAO on this to get that that information.
Sorry, a 1-year window to gather
Data around the project in Wesleyville and whether or not and what the needs would be for a fire station related to it.
No, there's not a window. I'm sorry, there's I'll use. Sorry. So no, there's not a 1-year window in order to obtain that. I think one of the key messages here for council to remember is that at this point there is no project, right? We are in the initial stages of just having conversation. I think we're started on a high level overview of a feasibility study in order to assist us with proper planning should the project move forward. Timelines, from what I can gather at this point and what OPG has been clear about, is we are looking at least 5 years until there's a determination as to whether or not the project will actually proceed, at which point we would then be looking at a host agreement. But we're nowhere near there yet. I think the initial project description application will take place late fall, which will then start the work in terms of the impact studies and infrastructure studies and things like that that will need to be done from OPG. But I think that's just something to remember. And I think I support the fire chief in the request to say, regardless of what happens with OPG, because we could be looking at 15 to 20 years down the line before there's like concrete information as to what the benefits would be or whether there would be a need for a new fire station. There's also some opportunity to consider at this point. It's been identified through official plan work and work through the county, that there's going to be growth in Port Hope. There's a growth forecast. And so based on that information, I think we need to be considerate of the fact that we are growing, and we need to ensure that we're able to meet the services of that growth, regardless of any projects that are related to the OPG project.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe just a slight rephrase of, would we be expecting any additional data by the time we get to that fall report that may impact this particular project?
I can't say for sure. I'm sorry. Again, I think that there will be indications that come from the feasibility study as to what potential impacts could be if the project were to proceed, but it won't be concrete data at that point. It'll be a high-level overview as to things that we should consider so that we have a basis to start looking at those things moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And then, Chief, the other question I had was really back around the funds that we could get from the grant. And so appreciating that they're tied to that design, is that design portable to another location, or is it very site specific? And then the part B to that is, if it is site specific, Councillor Lesson asked about expansion. You had said it could go up a floor. What if we needed additional vehicles? What would we look at that point?
So just to reiterate, we've gone through the site plan approval process. We've gone through the design process at 55 Fox Road. So the design, I would suggest, is specific to that location because of location of services and those type of things. So there's been a lot of studies to be able to ensure the infrastructure that services that site can service the fire hall, which it can. Like I said, we've spent over $650,000 to get to where we are today for 55 Fox Road. There is potential for a second story addition, which would basically be utilized for sleeping accommodation for a full-time fire service. Very rough calculations to add that second floor is between $3 and $4 million. That is not incorporated in this, but is it possible? The answer is yes. And just to reiterate what the CEO was saying, I don't know the requirements that OPG, if and when everything goes through, it may be an additional fire hall, like I was saying, maybe full-time fire. There's lots of unknowns, but and I kind of keep bringing it back to here, what I know today, what I knew 3 years ago, what we knew 15 years ago, is Station 2 needs to be replaced.
And then as far as the expansion, what about vehicles? If we had to have additional vehicles, are we able to expand at that location?
So through the chair, we're not able to expand horizontally. We do have 4 bays. So we actually do have the 4th bay, which we utilize for training. So we would never have more than a 4-bay hall. So it's going to be able to satisfy our current vehicle complement. And if we had to add additional vehicles, you could house those as well.
Thank you, Director. I'm going to just keep going this way. So did you have okay, we're just going to go down the line. Go ahead, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Director Williams. I'm going to say right off the bat, I'm uncomfortable with the ask as it is right now. I think part of my discomfort is where the rationale for replacing Fire Station 2 to me is very clear and very reasonable. Totally get it. But what we're looking at in this design is not a replacement for Fire Station 2. It is a replacement of Fire Station 2 plus replacing some of the current functionality of Station 1 plus building for the future plus it's plus. And I think there's a lot of rationale for that. I appreciate the work that went into the fire master plan. And it seems like just yesterday, it's only a few years ago, but a lot has changed in the context of Port Hope in those few years. Things change really quickly. And so I think I'm concerned about a rationale for decision-making where, because we made one decision last year, we should continue down that path. Or, every year it's, well, we've already spent this amount of money. We've already made this decision. We've already gone so far. And so we are committed to continuing down a path. And as you're hearing, we're only halfway around the table. There are still so many questions around it, and it's $11 million, right? $11 million that we all know we don't have, right? And my question is, when we're looking at building for the future, we're not building a building that is in line with, energy efficiency and, green infrastructure or any of those things, which we have prioritized for our future as a community. It's being done at a time when we don't yet have the information about the OPG. We don't have the final information from the county official plan in terms of where growth is going to be allocated in our community. There's a lot of questions, I think, and I don't know how to square having questions and then committing to spend $11 million that we don't have. And your point, I think, earlier around if we were to use all of those different funding, you yourself admitted that's not realistic, right? And it offsets. So we could use the infrastructure grants that we're already going to be getting towards this project, but then Victoria Street South reconstruction ends up on the levy, right? So we have competing infrastructure projects. So I think I'm not sure. I don't really have a question. I think I'm just expressing my discomfort with the size of the ask, especially because we do know that we were careening down a path when it came to a new water tower in the same way that we then pulled back and said, you know what, in today's climate, we cannot afford that water tower. We're now looking at a more affordable option that's going to get us through the medium term. And I'm wondering whether, if we were not to move forward with this, would there be an opportunity to go back to the drawing board, accept the sunk cost, right? But to look at what is actually feasible with what is affordable by this community at this time, and thinking about the future once we have some of those additional questions answered.
Director Williams, do you want to respond to any of the content of the comments?
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you. And through the chair, I appreciate your comments. So just to touch base on it, 3 years and $650,000 is not a small investment, I would suggest. And since 2022 to 2024, we just started 2025, I would suggest fundamentally that the demographics and data over the course of 24 months hasn't dramatically changed when it comes to residential, commercial, and industrial development within our community. Therefore, I would say the data collection and analysis performed for the development of the Fire Master Plan is still valid. The aspect of the leads or the green portion of the fire hall, something I spoke of, I think, with you probably 2 years ago, that adds 25% to the cost of this project. 25. So we can, and one of the aspects as well is because we're utilizing already owned municipal property, attaching it to an already owned municipal building, using already owned municipal services, all being cost saving measures, we can't then put in a new heating system or a geothermal system or a solar system because we're utilizing already existing infrastructure, which is cost savings, but doesn't allow us to go down that road if you wanted to, which would also cost us 25% more. So those just to answer those questions there. So when it comes to future growth, like Councillor Andrews and Councillor Todd mentioned, the importance of OPG being one aspect, but future growth and development of our community, which we know is going to happen whether OPG comes or not. The requirement for a training room for both ourselves and the police service, for a training tower, which our municipality and the county does not have. All aspects that are being funded by the grant that I'm asking to apply for. Is it bigger than Fire Station 2? Absolutely. It needs to be. Does it have a training room? Does it have a training tower? Absolutely. We need them. And they're both going to be funded by this grant if we get it. So both, I appreciate that. We are building for what we need now and for in the future. And it's an investment not only in the fire service, our personnel, but also our community.
Thank you, Director. And I'm going to go to the end of this table and make my way to the center. So, Councillor Jarrell.
So a couple of my questions are, echoing what everybody else has already said. A lot of concerns I've talked to some residents over the past few days are really concerned about the impacts on the affordability of the tax levy, and also with their house insurance, which is based off the proximity they are from a fire station. So there's that is a big concern. My other concern is, where is Fire Station 3 in its life cycle? By the time this is all done, and we're going to be on deck to replace that next. And my last question, I guess, is, has there been any sources of funding looked at in a sponsorship or some sort of fundraising opportunity if you had a crystal ball and you got all the funding you wanted to keep the remaining balance off of the levy? You know what I mean? Like maybe there's a naming right to the building or a donation wall plaque or something, just to keep the cost off the taxpayer. Those are my points on it anyway.
Thank you. And through the chair, just to address those points, I was making some quick questions. So if you think historically, and I've been in Port Hope for 3 years, fundamentally, there's never been a new fire hall constructed. Think about that. Not a new, Fire Station 3 was a library that was turned into a fire hall, right? Fire Station 2 was built by our firefighters. Fire Station 1 has been in existence since the fire service started. So there hasn't been a new fire hall built in Port Hope in decades, many decades. In our community, I would suggest has changed over the course of the last 100 years, right? So the lack of investment in fire service infrastructure is showing. Fire Station 3, we have just actually performed a number of upgrades that will not require be required to be replaced for many years. Fire Station 1, we've done some limited renovations to make it sustainable. So that's still a viable station for us. So just to speak to that point, in relation to the location, I hear this, I've heard this as well, is that we're moving the station 1.8 kilometers to the south, 1.8 kilometers. But what we're doing is moving it 1.8 kilometers closer to 90% of the firefighters. This is not a full-time fire service, folks, right? So it's not a manned fire hall. So you're in 8 kilometers of an empty building. 8 kilometers of an empty building, not a manned fire hall. So if we can move the fire hall closer to where the firefighters are, the firefighters get in the trucks faster and the response times will be better. I've said this before, right? Having an empty building doesn't protect your home. Having the fire hall closer to where the firefighters live, 90% of the firefighters live south of the 401 and work at a Station 2. That's a fact.
Councillor Adam.
Thank you. So first off, I'm going to note that Todd must have been stealing my notes because he went through a lot of the different things that I was already going to go through. So first off, I want to thank you for bringing this forward. I appreciate the fact that you are doing your job. You had a grant opportunity, and I think it is very appropriate for you to bring it forward. Whether or not we decide yay or nay, that's different, but I'm glad that you brought it forward for us to make that. So one of the things that was touched on was the design and whether or not that could fit a different location. And it is definitely something that I wanted to talk about too. And I realized that it is designed to be set up for certain infrastructure. I don't think that would be extremely expensive to be changing that over of how to set it up for a different type of infrastructure situation. But overall, the design outside of the connections, would that be something that could be moved from one location to the next? And then I also have a question about the grant and how long until we have to make that commitment to be able to get that grant. Is that 1 week? Is it a month? Is it 3 months? How long is this grant open for? Then I have a question about Station 2. So it was identified nearly 15 years ago that it needs to be replaced. Can it last a couple more years? Like if it's lasted the 15 years since it was identified, does it have a couple more years into it? And the reason why I ask that is for the obvious reason of the OPG. As you are aware of, but I'll let everybody know, you and I have had some good conversations about this, as well as sending over 10 questions over at OPG on trying to identify the different needs that they will be having. Do we have enough time to wait that out until we get those answers? And the only reason I say that is because I think it's inappropriate for us to spend money, taxpayer money, on a building and then find out a year or two later that we have to build another one. And I don't know if we need 4 in this area or whether or not we can wait that out. So please.
Thank you. Just I've been making notes. If I miss something, let me know, please. So through the chair, the answer for your last point is I don't know either. Is there going to be a requirement 10 years from now or 5 years from now to build Fire Station 4 in Wesleyville? Maybe. Potentially. Maybe not. I don't know. I wish I did have my crystal ball. I wish I had the answers to those 10 questions that I asked OPG, but I don't. What I have are the facts now. What I have is the data that's driven this project. What I have is where we're at today and the investment we've made and the importance of replacing it. Fundamentally, will the building stand for another year? Will the building stand for another 2 or 3 years? Maybe. We're having issues with the foundation starting to fail. My biggest concern is the health and safety of my members. The fact that it's in non-compliance with many pieces of legislation, many requirements under standards, many suggested recommendations from when it comes to things like decontamination and cancer prevention that just aren't in place there. And we're doing them a disservice. I truly do believe that. And that's why I've taken this project on when I first started. I take it to heart, and it's the importance to protect our firefighters and our residents, which is important to me and is a priority for myself. When it comes to changing the location, could we potentially use the design at another location? I'm going to say potentially. I don't have that answer. I would suggest it's a potential. We are tying into an existing building, attaching that building to an existing building. So fundamentally, I would suggest there be some design changes. I'm not an engineer, but I'd suggest you probably be able to utilize aspects. Could you change the location? Potentially. Something I'd have to look into. The grant commitment, we would have 12 months to start construction, like I said, once we accepted the funding agreement. So if we were successful, we'd have to commit to funding the rest of the project before we get the money, grant money, and we have to start construction in 12 months, and we have to complete construction in 5 years. So before we get the funds, obviously we have to commit to the rest.
Yes, follow up.
Thank you. And what if we don't get the full grant? Because it's up to X amount. What if we only get $500,000? Then what happens?
Yeah, so the grant, it's the Ontario Ministry of Labor Skills Development Fund. So it's there to provide funding for aspects of the project related to training and development. So approximately 30% of the rough square footage of this project is dedicated to training. So that's what we're asking to fund. If we only get funding for 10% of it, then I'm going to come back to you and say we only got funding for 10% of it. I have no other option, unfortunately. So.
Thank you, Director. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So thank you for the presentation, and thank you also for everybody for showing up today. It's great to see a turnout. I have 3 questions and then a comment. So my first question, you mentioned the increase of calls. Has this impacted response times?
Do you want me to answer one by
Okay,
one?
I'll ask the
I can
other
make
3 and
notes?
then I'll.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question is the site plan, going back to the site plan and the cost. When I read in the report, it said at $535,000, the design is 40% complete. So am I correct to assume around another $600,000 in the design itself? So
Yeah,
that
one more
depending
question.
on that question, I have a
Okay.
follow-up. So
why
those are the
don't, why don't
two.
we deal with the first 2? So through the chair, in relation to the calls, our calls, like you've said, have gone from just over 500 to just over 700. So when it comes to response times, our response times in themselves have not increased, but the number of calls have. So what that is also doing is putting wear and tear on our members because the number of firefighters that we have who are all volunteers. When the pagers go off, they're all leaving their homes, they're all leaving their workplaces to attend these calls. The calls are going up. It's not affecting the response times because we have dedicated members. We have folks who show up each and every time to answer the calls. So going through the data and analyzing the data when it comes to call response over the past 24 months, it hasn't been impacted by the volume of calls, but there is an impact on our members. Absolutely, because they're responding to that many more calls when it comes to physical, mental, wear and tear and strain. Absolutely, there's impacts associated with increasing your workload by that percentage. When it comes to site plan, so that $535,000 is the total cost for the design. So we're committed to $535,000. We already signed a contract for that. So when I say we've spent it, we will be spending it because we're committed to the contract for the full design of the station, which will be $535,000. Previously in 2022, we committed to $150,000 for site plan, which we've also spent and obtained.
Did you have a
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment on this for a minute because, so I went to the open house or up in Canton, and I remember the firefighters who turned out to that in support of this, and many of those firefighters were Ward 2, Garden Hill. They work out of that station. And when I look to the firefighters themselves who are supporting this, that is very telling for me. They are the experts. They in their volume that were there and what their consensus told a story. When I think back to the fire master plan that was delivered maybe 4 years ago, it identified Osaka as the most vulnerable or furthest reaching community. So I asked the question, will this station in this location reach that furthest location quickest? And those firefighters that were there unanimously nodded yes, because they can get on the 401 and they can get off at Wesleyville and be there as opposed to working around the intersection in Welcome. For me, I understand the rural community, the Station 2 was donated, it was built by that community, and it was funded by that community, which I think needs to be addressed in of itself. But for myself, and I'll make it personal, I've been in 2 fires. That 1 second response time is a lifetime. It literally is a lifetime. So I say to sorry, I'm getting emotional. One of them was a fatality. So it becomes very personal. So I understand the rural community. You may be missing a building, but you could be gaining a life or your building in that moment. So I struggle. The points that were brought up about we don't know what our community is going to look like in 5 years and 10 years. I think those are very valid concerns. So I struggle with this decision now because if I delay it and it means one life or one loss of a home, that's on the decision I'm making today. So I really struggle with this at this time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you through the chair. Just to address that, I appreciate your comments, and I couldn't agree more. In the province of Ontario, the first 12 weeks of this year, 14 people have lost their lives in fires in communities that surround ours, including Oshawa and Trenton and Clarington. So it happens. It happens, unfortunately, too often. The average is 2 people pass away in fires in Ontario every week. Every week. In the province of Ontario, someone passes away in a fire. So it's my job to do what's right for the community to ensure the safety of all. And this decision and the location of the station is the right decision. I like to just say one thing when it comes to the folks that built Fire Station 2. District Chief Sean Cool, who's in charge of Station 2 now, his father built Station 2. His father passed away from occupational disease as being a firefighter. So the man who built that station passed away from cancer, who worked out of that station, and his son The only thing he wants to see is a new station for his firefighters to make sure that they're safe and they don't end up like his father.
Thank you, Director. And I think that there's been so many questions and comments around the table that have covered off some of the things that I would have wanted to ask, but I'm going to start by a little bit of follow-up with a theme that the Deputy Mayor raised. I'm interested, what risk are we putting the municipality at if we actually do not proceed with a new fire station, both from the perspective of those who serve our community as firefighters, and as well as if we're actually reducing our capacity to respond to emergencies and fires. So I'm going to ask from a risk and responsibility perspective what we are going to be taking on if we don't proceed. That's going to be my first question to you.
I'll answer that question because it's important. In relation to the risk associated with our firefighters, I first started in Port Hope. I attended all the stations to introduce myself. I walked into Fire Station 2 and the extractor, which is an industrial sized washing machine where they're required to wash their clothes, is sitting in the middle of their break and training room. They had no backup power. The power was off. They had no running water. Came back from a call, couldn't wash their hands, couldn't wash their clothes. And when they could, they had to wash them beside the spot where they had coffee, coming from a fatal accident on Highway 401. It's not acceptable. So when I say the risk associated with that, I can tell you the man who built that fire hall passed away from cancer he got as serving this community. The risks are vast. 40% greater risk of getting cancer as a firefighter compared to the average person. And right now, the way that Fire Station 2 is set up and constructed, the lack of decontamination equipment, I can go on and on. The requirements and suggestions, requirements, and regulations that are in place that currently, unfortunately, are not being met to protect the health and safety of our firefighters is not in place at Fire Station 2. It's not in place. So I'm going to talk to our community. At some point, Fire Station 2 is going to have to be closed. Bottom line. Is it today? Is it tomorrow? Is it next year? I don't know that. I can't say that. And I wouldn't say that because I don't have the data to support that. But it will be closed. And when we have to close that station, because we haven't had the forethought to invest in the replacement of it, there will be an impact to this community. There will be an impact on response times. There will be an impact of our firefighters getting to people who need us.
Thank you for that. And I guess I was just trying to press you on whether or not we could be at risk for a lawsuit if we're not following the regulations that are required of us, and if there's a loss of life because we've been compromised in our ability to respond to an emergency.
Thank you. To speak to potential lawsuit, I think there's always an opportunity for someone to file, obviously, civil litigation if one was not following the requirements of provincial regulation, of standards that are set out by a national organization when it comes to response times, when it comes to health and safety of workers and obligations under provincial legislation. It may leave us susceptible.
So a couple of follow-up comments I want to make is I think that, as rightly has been pointed out, is that I think folks are sometimes conflating physical location with emergency response time and abilities. And I'm glad that you have clarified for us that actually location in this instance becomes less of a concern than where actually the best location is for our volunteer firefighters to reach in a timely fashion. I also want to dovetail back into, you had talked about the extent of community consultations that have been undertaken over the last number of years. And as I think about, again, it's been raised again previously, but I want to raise it again, is that the best people suited to really understand the needs in this particular sphere are the experts and those volunteer firefighters that put their lives on the line every time they respond to a call, and that they know best. And if they are all supportive of this kind of physical move and location, then I have to trust that they know what they need and that they know what will allow them to do the job best to support the safety of this community.
Thank you, Mayor. I couldn't agree more. I don't know if you recall when I first introduced this project to this council, the lines of this chambers were lined with the men and women who serve this community with Port Hope Fire and Emergency Services. They were here on their own time. They were here to show the support of this project due to the fact that they realize the importance of this project to the community. They realize the importance of this project to the members of the service.
And then I'm going to dovetail with my more strategic hat because I know that the OPG discussion has come up and the concerns about timing and not being aligned. So my question is this for you, Chief and Director. If you applied for this grant and you received this grant in the full amount, could we use this to leverage with discussions with OPG as we're also trying to align what they may need for our community should a project continue to move forward? Because we do know that some of the things that we're thinking about in our strategic plan, not just limited to this particular project, but other assets that we're thinking about for the community have to be somehow aligned with OPG and their timelines, and the two things aren't going to come together perfectly because they have their agenda. We know that their timelines are longer than some of the timelines we're expecting for certain projects, but would that allow us to leverage more support for this and other projects moving forward so that we wouldn't see any kind of pressure on the tax levy?
Thank you. And great example of this just occurred not many kilometers from here in Clarington. Clarington Fire and Emergency Services received grant funding for several $1 million for a new fire center. And the remaining portion of that is being covered by OPG. So there's a partnership between the fire service who obtained this grant and OPG to fully fund the capital project. So absolutely there's potential for this project to be multi-funded. I would suggest based on what's happening 15 kilometers down the road.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Less.
What I would suggest is that this whole thing keys on that grant to a large extent. So if we receive the report, approve the support for going ahead to apply for the grant, and made number 3 the commitment to fund the rest of it contingent upon what the grant is. So it has to come back to us anyways for that part of it. And that also gives us, by the time you start the process of applying for the grant, we can work with OPG to see what further things we can get. I can't believe that they can't tell us right now what they did in Clarington and other communities in terms of distances for fire and support and type of facility they need. They know that stuff. Well, if they don't,
Well, thank you.
they've done it,
Thank
so
you,
they
Councillor.
should.
No, thank you. I think the first part of your suggestion is a really good one, but I do think we have to be careful in saying that they know what we need because we don't know what that project is going to be exactly, the size and the scope, and that is very much going to determine the nuances of some of this. But I do think that the idea, I mean, we've heard the cost increases since 2014 around this project. We know from what you've said, Director, that grants for these kinds of projects are few and far between. And so I very much like the idea that we give support for applying for this grant and then potentially using that should you be successful. And your track record in this area has been pretty formidable. To leverage and have those conversations with OPG. It gives us a bit more time, but not to take advantage of this grant opportunity, I think sets us further behind in something that we know we're going to eventually need to do for the community. So thank you for raising that.
I mean, to say that they know chapter and verse what we need, but they have an idea. So
Any further comments or thoughts around this? So we do have a recommended motion on the agenda, and I'm wondering, based on Councillor Les, do you want to make an amended motion to put forward?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was listening to the amended motion that Councillor Andrews would like to put on the floor, and I would like to read it out loud, and you can confirm whether this is your intent, Councillor Andrews. So the motion that would require a mover and seconder reads as follows: that Council receive report PS 0525 regarding the Fire Station 2 replacement project. That Council support and approve the Municipality of Port Hope's application to the Ontario Government Skills Development Fund grant to assist in the partial funding of the Fire Station 2 replacement project, and that Council commit to funding the construction costs contingent on the funding received from the SDF grant associated with the Fire Station 2 replacement project starting in 2026, and that staff be directed to report back to Council on next steps following the outcome of the grant application process. Okay, thank you. Madam Mayor, that would still require a mover and seconder.
Oh, I don't think your mic is working there.
Madam Mayor, that would require a mover and seconder.
Okay, so Councillor Les, I believe, is moving it. Somebody wants to second it. Councillor Darrell. Would we like to have a further discussion around this at all? Councillor Clare?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, Councillor Les. I think that is an improvement on the recommended motion and certainly addresses, I think, part of the concern. For me, it doesn't address all of the concern because I think, again, we have competing priorities. We know we have a number of capital projects on the horizon, all of which, again, have very serious ramifications if we don't move forward with them potentially as well. And I'm not sure, I'm still uncomfortable with committing to funding one capital project that we're looking at in isolation on the basis of a timeline by an external party, right? The grant-making body of the provincial government, without being able to look at this within the context of all of those capital projects and our overall asset management plan and what we can afford. So I appreciate the motion, but again, you know, until we know we're in budget process and we're able to look at this comprehensively as part of our overall capital expense planning, I'm still not totally comfortable.
Thank you, Councillor Clare. Any other comments? Okay, I saw Councillor Adam and then Councillor Todd.
Just for clarity off of what Councillor Clare was just saying, the commitment is not a pre-budget approval, though. This is just a commitment so that you can apply for the grant, and then it'll come back to us so that we can actually make that budget approval at that point, correct? Thank you.
I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure that that question is actually answered by Councillor Les and the clerk in terms of the actual language that we've got. Would it be possible to put it up just so that we can? Sorry, and while you put it up, maybe yes, I'm going to go to Councillor Todd for his comments.
I have similar concerns. I was going to suggest as a friendly amendment to this that item 3 is actually taken off, just to make it clear that we're going to go ahead with items 1 and 2 on the motion. And then I think you had added a fourth portion, which is staff would then come back with the determination of that grant outcome. For me, I'd be more comfortable if we just struck number 3 altogether on this.
And flipping back to Councillor Adam on this.
And maybe clarity, do they not require a commitment of funding for applying for the grant? Can we cross out 3 and still apply for it?
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So I don't have any comments about this right now, but to Councillor Claire's point, you said there's very serious capital projects coming forward. When will, do we have to wait till budget time to see this? Because I don't know when we're going to hear back from this grant. Would you be prepared at that time to make a decision knowing there's other capital projects? Because we need to keep moving on this. So do you need to, I don't know if now is the time, but at some point give some sort of direction that you are prepared to make a decision based on the fact that we have other capital projects? Because you said other important ones, but I can't think in this moment which one, you know what I mean? It's not the moment, but.
Yeah, so if you reading our asset management plans, it sort of gives the timeline for other significant capital projects we know are on the horizon. We know, for example, Cavan Street and Ontario Street are both the same vintage as Walton Street, which had to be replaced. We know those things are coming. Believe we've already gone down a long way down the road on the Victoria Street South reconstruction. And just there's other priorities, and I think, I'll say this, me personally, found myself in the position at this budget, and when we were looking at the 2025 budget, where something that came forward separate from the budget process, when I looked at it in the context of the overall budget, I regretted that decision because I hadn't been able to see all of the impacts of that. And I don't want to make that's the mistake I don't want to make, especially when we're talking about $11 million.
Thank you, Councillor Claire. And just to go back to the clarification, Chief, you were talking about the fact that this grant would be funding X amount of the current budget. We've talked about other sources that could be covering the costs. You've also clearly indicated to us that we have a precedent down the road of OPG providing funding that we could leverage if we were successful in this grant. So I'm very supportive of this particular motion, which is taking out item 3 and moving forward, because I do think you make a persuasive case, Director, that these kinds of grants don't come along very often, and I don't want to leave the opportunity of $4 million on the table. So we have a.
Madam Mayor, the original motion as moved by
Yes.
Councillor Andrews and seconded by Councillor
Yes.
Toms is on the table. So if we want to remove item 3, it will require an amendment,
Yeah.
which will need a mover and seconder.
So can that be a friendly amendment by either the mover or seconder? Do we have to vote on this and then move to an alternative motion?
My advice would be the motion to remove item 3 is on the screen now, that item 3 be removed from the main motion and the motion renumbered accordingly.
Okay.
So we can pass, we would require a mover and
Okay,
seconder.
so can I get a mover and seconder for this? Councillor Todd, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. So now we have a potentially alternate motion. So I'm going to go back to the original mover. Councillor Less, are you comfortable with putting forward this alternative motion?
I am.
Councillor Councillor Darrell, are you comfortable with seconding this motion?
Yep.
Any further discussion? Yes.
Sorry, the main purpose of this report was one to bring up the grant opportunity, but many grant opportunities actually require a commitment explicitly. This is a large grant application from the municipality for the funding to be able to proceed with it. Right? Obviously, they don't want to commit $3 million and the municipality turns around and says, we're not going to proceed with this project. So I'm not sure. I want to ask the director whether that is a requirement of this, because I don't want to lessen our chance of getting $3 million because it's not going to come around again. And then if I may, the wording, specifically, Jason and I spoke about the approval versus the commitment. The wording commitment was in there very specifically because most grants require a commitment, but it wasn't worded in terms of an approval, meaning we're not giving an $11 million approval in which could go and be spent, say next January. The thought with this is we've got 3 years to look at the funding right? There's different approaches. There's other projects and very good points that have been brought up. But do move ahead now with the grant, commit so that we are putting our best foot forward to get the $3 million grant. And then we can look at a strategy over a 3-year period with other grant funding sources in conjunction with our other, capital projects on how we would go about, how's the best way to go about funding this. So, my argument right now is the commitment would allow them to kind of keep working forward on design. It would allow us to move forward on the grant. It would also allow us to have any discussions with OPG, thought appropriate, but it doesn't, give us approval to go ahead and, award the contract or anything from that standpoint. So I just want to provide that bit of clarification, and just to make sure that we're not jeopardizing ourselves on the $3 million grant by removing that clause, because it was put in for a specific reason. And I just was trying to get in before that vote happened. But
Thank you for that. Director, do you want to clarify? Because I do believe we had a discussion around this. What was the requirement of the grant? And I suppose worst case scenario, we got the grant and we did not want to spend it, we could return the money, could we not?
Unfortunately, my understanding is in line with Director Baxter, is that as part of the grant application process, the municipality, there has to be a commitment to fund the remaining portion of the project. That we've already invested, I said $685,000. We have to show that we have to already have been to the 40% design phase. We have to be vested to commit to funding the remaining portions of the project at a certain time above and beyond the grant. Yes, sorry.
Councillor Todd.
Yeah, sorry. I thought earlier you said the grant needed to have a design that was 40% completed, which we've done, and then the funds would be released contingent on us funding the building should you get it. So those are different than what you're saying now. You're now saying that in order to apply for the grant, we have to also submit a commitment?
As part of obtaining the grant, so maybe my words just weren't as clear, because as part of the to obtain the grant, the municipality has to commit to funding the remaining portions of the project. So that is correct. So as part of the application process, there's a number of things we have to submit, and one of the boxes we have to tick is saying that there's a commitment from municipality to proceed with this project. We've already designed 40% of it, and there's going to be a commitment to fund the remaining portions before they hand us over a check for whatever grant funding there is.
And maybe the semantics in this is really around the timing of that commitment. So what you're saying is if we were to get the grant and then we decide not to fund it, then they have to take the money back. Is that how that works?
My understanding when dealing with numerous provincial grants is we're provided with a funding agreement, and want to enter into that funding agreement, we'd have to meet a number of stipulations. But like I said, as part of the application of this is we have to check the box off saying that we want to proceed with this project, or otherwise we wouldn't be asking for the grant.
Director, I have just a follow-up from that, and that is, what is the timing of applying for this grant, and when will we exactly hear back on whether we're successful or not with the grant?
Thank you. And currently it is an open-ended grant. So the money is available until it runs out. So it's first come, first serve. So once the money is gone, it's gone. It doesn't close. There's not a stipulated time period. I know personally of a number of different municipalities, including fire services, that are applying for this grant to support other projects throughout the province of Ontario. So there is no time. It's first come, first serve. So I've put myself in a position when this opened up in the late fall of last year, to start obtaining all the required documentation to put us in a position to come forward to council to seek your approval to make application for this grant. And that's where we are today.
So that's part of the answer, which is first come, first serve. But do you have a sense, because it's been open since the fall, do you know of any other municipalities that have applied for the monies and whether they've received any kind of answer on their grant application?
Thank you, Mayor. Not not through this round. The previous round where Clarington obtained the grant was the first round of funding. The second round, which was just opened up in the fall of 2024, as far to my knowledge, there has been no successful applications granted thus far because there's so much requirements associated with the application. There's a lot of work behind it. So,
Okay, Councillor Less.
Yeah, I suggest you put my clause back in.
Okay, we'll have to do another motion then for that, but before we get there, Councillor Clare.
Hi, sorry, I am looking at the application form, and what I see is a requirement that we have to indicate that we have the capacity to fund the full project should the grant be approved, but there does not, to my view, seem to be a requirement that we commit to doing so at the stage of application. So I don't know if that helps in terms of the wording of our motion tonight, but.
through the chair, I appreciate that, Councillor, and I think that speaks to the change of verbiage that we used. Originally, I had proposed pre-budget approval for this project, and in consultation with Director Baxter, we amended that to ensuring we had the capacity and to look for your folks' authorization for me to approve. So we'd actually be in a position. So if we want to amend it, if you're looking at the application and want to use the verbiage directly out of the application, I'm okay with that we have the capacity, or what's the verbiage that you use there?
It says, does your organization have the financial capacity to complete the capital project and operate the project asset through the 5-year intended use period?
So that, thank you for bringing that forward. And again, going back to what you said previously, where we stand now in terms of our capacity with the various sources of funding, not taking into account any discussions potentially with OPG, you're talking about at this point in time, potentially $900,000 on the tax levy, if we take into account all the other resources that might come to bear on this?
Thank you, Mayor. And if we take all the available opportunities, so if we look at the OCIF funding, that was just changed actually, so that we're actually able to utilize that funding source for the construction of fire stations. Specifically, they added for the construction of fire stations, which is very important because they realize the costs associated with these type of projects. So that funding, along with federal building funding, our development charge funding, which is over $4 million, including the grant. Based on those numbers, the tax levy impact, if all those funding sources were utilized, would be just under $900,000. Yes.
And that's prior, again, to any potential conversations with OPG. Okay.
Correct.
So then, where we are now, I'm going to go back to the clerk and ask, we've got a motion on the table that has been revised from the original. We have a mover and seconder to it. I think there's an issue around language that we've got that we're discussing. So going back to Councillor Less, because he's the original mover, would you like to make a friendly amendment?
So, Madam Mayor, it would not be a friendly amendment. We would need to require a mover and seconder for the following that is there. And because Councillor Andrews is the original mover, we would request.
All right, so going back to you, and we do have an alternative motion on the screen. Would you like to second this, Councillor Darrow?
Yes.
Okay, any last further discussion or comment on this proposal? Okay, yes, Councillor Adam.
I just want to say I appreciate the fact that the Director of Finance did chime in on this and suggest that this is a very good idea. So thank you.
Yes, and thank you to Councillor Clare for looking at the application as well. So any further comments, discussions on this? Can we just get it up on the screen so everybody has a chance to look at it? And once we do the vote on this particular motion, we will be taking a break.
So, Madam Mayor, the revised motion is as follows. That council receive report PS 0. Oh, Madam Mayor, I just realized the motion to add that item needs to be voted on, correct?
So
Yes.
we have got
You-
a mover and seconder from Councillor Less and
Yeah.
seconded by Councillor Darrell. So you can now read it out.
Okay, okay. So that council receive report PS 0525 regarding the Fire Station 2 replacement project, that council support and approve the municipality of Port Hope's application to the Ontario Government Skill Development Fund grant to assist in the partial funding of the Fire Station 2 replacement project, and that council commit to ensuring that financial capacity for funding the construction costs associated with the Fire Station 2 replacement project starting in 2026, contingent on the funding received from the SDF grant, and that staff be directed to report back to council on next steps following the outcome of the grant application process.
Thank you for reading that out. So we have a mover and seconder. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. Now take a 10-minute recess.
And if that happens, then the bylaw will have to be updated as well. So right now, we can maintain the committee chair being a part of the committee. And if and when that changes, we can look at a process for affording other members of council an opportunity to sit on the emergency management program committee.
Councillor Clare.
Sorry, I just had to remind myself because I made these notes last week. But my question is related to the same clause, because the way it reads right now, it says as selected by the community management coordinator with reference to the council member as well. And I thought we would probably select from ourselves who that representative would be. So I wondered if that language could be tweaked to indicate it would be council self-selecting as opposed to one of us being selected by the chair.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm absolutely fine with that.
So do we need, to the clerk, do we need to have a specific motion for that amendment?
Through the chair, I think we just have to amend the attached bylaw to the report.
So that's correct, Madam Mayor. I mean, it is the will of council. If council wants to make a formal amendment to add that on there, but it sounds like the director is fine with that change, and then the updated bylaw for council consideration that'll come next week will have that change reflected.
Okay, sounds like I see so, or it looks like I've got some head shaking here. So the, again, going back, the recommended motion is listed on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Less. All in favor? Thank you. Passed. Item 4.6, Report DS0525, removal of holding H5 provision ZB01 2025 and Site Plan Agreement SP01 2025 6710 Ganaraska Road. Does staff have anything further to add before council considers this report?
Thank you, through the chair. Not too much to add. This is a subject property that is within the Oak Ridges Moraine. The proposed single detached dwelling is within the Oak Ridges Moraine linkage area, and as such, it is subject to a holding provision, which would be removed after the registration of a site plan. So this report details that the applicant has satisfied the requirements for the removal of the holding, and the site plan is in process right now.
Thank you, Director. Any questions or comments about this report? Councillor Less?
That's a heck of a strip of land. That's a long, it looks like a runway. Yeah, that's pretty big property.
Through the chair, yes, it's a large property. It has a few zones on it, and the further north you go up the property, it enters into that Oak Ridges Moraine area.
Okay, so the recommended motion is on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Darrell, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor? That's passed. And moving on to Report 4.7, Report DS0625, Re-Economic Development Strategic Plan 2024 Report. Does staff have anything further to add before Council considers this report?
Thank you. And through the chair, I'll provide a brief introduction to the report. And if there's any further questions, Meg is here from our economic development team, and I'm happy to support with questions as well. But in brief, the Economic Development Strategic Plan was approved by Council in December of 2023. It was also supported by an in-depth implementation plan that broke down the number of recommended actions that were within the strategic plan. And the first year of the implementation of our economic development strategic plan was in 2024. And so this is an annual report that details the initiatives undertaken in this year in relationship to the action items identified within the strategic plan. It's important to note that while economic development does oversee and update and report on this economic development strategic plan, that truly the actions identified within this plan require partnership from both internal and external members of this community and of staff. So, in acknowledgement to those partnerships, it's truly why we've been able to achieve a number of initiatives, and many of them are still ongoing from 2024, and they will move forward. But just taking a moment to recognize the partnerships that were struck and continue to be developed in order to carry out this plan.
Thank you, Director. And I'm going to open it up for questions and comments around the table. Councillor Less?
It's sort of a comment with a question mark at the end of it, that you have 47 goals, 10 of them within 6 months, and another 11 within 1 to 2 years. How are you going to accomplish all that with such limited manpower?
Thank you. Through the chair, it is a challenge, of course, to accomplish a number of goals. Some objectives are ongoing actions, that things that we have in place that we will continue to operate and work on pending, of course, continued funding. For example, our community improvement plan is an action item that we continue to work on an ongoing basis every year and invest in the community through the program supported by that plan. With respect to other actions, it's a very good question. We council has provided funding in support of committing to following through on the identified actions in the Economic Development Strategic Plan. So for this year, Council committed $125,000 towards the completion of many action items. The staff will strive to use that funding to complete as much as we can, and also work on continuing where we can ask for the help of partners and other departments to support in these efforts too. So it's an indirect answer to your question, but we hope to undertake as many actions as we can within this 2025 year, and we will report on what we were able to do and what maybe had to be pushed.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up,
Yeah, I know funds are very, very limited. 125,000 is not very much to work with. I'm of the opinion that you'll do the best you can with the resources you have. And that, I'm taking kind of a longer term view that economic development should really be taken somewhat off our table and put on the OPG calendar, because the economic development will come that way, and we should probably concentrate our efforts on what can we do for Old Port Hope, meaning all of Port Hope, old, new, whatever. So.
Thank you, Councillor Lass. Did you want to make a final?
Thank you. And through the chair, just a comment to that, and acknowledgement of your comment. And the beauty of the Economic Development Strategic Plan is that it was developed in 2023 prior to the announcements made with the potential for the OPG site. And this plan is intended to be carried out through to 2030. So of course there might be opportunities for updates and revisions to the plan as we move forward, and community goals and objectives and funding may change. But right now it is I think, important that this strategy continues to be carried out by the municipality, and we'll do our best as staff to achieve the actions as outlined.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And I'm going to just jump in and say, first of all, what I really appreciate about this plan is the acknowledgement of the importance of social infrastructure for economic development in this community. It's often not part of economic development plans, and yet we know how important those aspects are. So I really appreciate that. And I'm also thanking you, Director, for acknowledging how little $125,000 is to be putting towards economic development. So I want to thank the council again for making the decision to invest that money directly into the implementation of our economic development plan. There was a clear amount, and it was attached to a plan. But now I have a little bit more of a drilling down question. Given all the different priorities, and given Councillor Less's question, and given the fact that we are in a very critical strategic planning process, how do you see this plan interfacing with our strategic planning process and the kinds of prioritization of items that may then percolate up as ones that we really want to drill down on so we can get very focused?
Through the chair, that is an excellent question. I think it's certainly this economic development strategic plan, the way that it was laid out, is very useful for council to be looking to for their as part of the strategic planning process. It is a document that was endorsed by council, and so with these actions and objectives on the table here, continuing to drive that support through the strategic planning process will be very important to the potential for this plan to be carried out. And I would say, in terms of what priorities to strike, I think that they can be mutually reinforcing, is what is coming up in the strategic planning process and what is already being highlighted in our economic development strategic plan as important initiatives. And when you see those things coming up in multiple areas, then perhaps that's what's rising to the top here in terms of what we can focus on from as a community moving forward in terms of driving this economic growth, prosperity, but overall quality of life for our residents, which is, I think, an important part. Focus of this plan is that, of course, it is focused on economic prosperity, but as you mentioned, Madam Mayor, that it also is inextricably linked to overall quality of life, supporting that for our residents. So these goals and objectives are meant to do that as well. So it's not a direct answer in terms of what we should prioritize, but I would say is, as we continue through this strategic planning process, is recognizing, what is being brought up through multiple avenues and community engagement and staff engagement in that process, and what's being suggested and recommended here as part of a council approved plan.
Thank you for that. Any further thoughts or comments? Councillor Clare.
I have a very granular question just because I'm very curious. The foot traffic metric, I find that one really interesting, and I'm curious, how do you collect that?
I'll just give a moment for Meg to come to the I don't want to call it the stand, but we'll call it
that. Through the chair. We have 2 pedestrian counters that are installed, one in the downtown area. You'll notice it's a little box attached to one of our parking meters, and then we have one also installed at Memorial Park. As the economic development coordinator, I work with our contractor who runs the software for those counters. It's a very cool resource, because they offer for free, as part of our contract with them, our ongoing use of their services, data analysis and like, I forget what the word is, but reevaluation. So over the last year, we had to reconstitute a large portion of our data because of disruptions in that occurred from reconstruction, and they were able to surmise and basically reconstruct, using their analytics, what foot traffic probably looked like even though we didn't have accurate counts. So all this to say, it's quite a robust data set that we can leverage more if there is need for it, and I expect we will be leveraging it more, even in like one-off instances where, say, we have a major event that we want to track, get accurate data for on that. There's a lot to be said for this kind of data collection and analysis. This is a good question because it highlights the importance of data collection and analysis. This was the first year that we had even a semblance of data collection and analysis that can now be reported. It will act as a benchmark, and then we will be able to start really demonstrating progress on a whole host of goals. So thank you for the question.
Thank you for the answer. Councillor Adam.
While Meg's still there, hopefully. So does that mean that that we would be able to track, let's say, this weekend and the amount of foot traffic for the Float Your Fanny down the Ganny in our downtown area?
Through the chair.
Through the chair. Yes, we will be able to track downtown data per day.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, so the recommended motion is on the agenda, which is to receive this item for information. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Adam, seconded by Councillor Less. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Moving on, we have no notices of motion on the agenda tonight. So we'll move on to updates and new business briefly. Phase 3 of the Walton Street reconstruction project has begun. Walton Street between Pine Street and Cavan Street is now closed, and the contractor has started to mobilize equipment, prepare the area with fencing and signage, initiated work on temporary water lines. And just as we did in previous project phases, we will continue to keep the community informed on project progress throughout the construction. Be sure to follow our social media channels at Port Hope Digs Walton or visit porthope.ca/Walton. The second item that I want to give you an update on is an item that came before council, and that is an initiative that has been in progress for a while. At the council meeting of December 19th, 2023, council received and considered correspondence from Philip Lawrence MP for Northumberland Peterborough South regarding an initiative to find sister cities in Ukraine for municipalities in Canada. This was brought forward as a potential partnership opportunity for the municipality by Philip Lawrence's team. Twinning with Ukrainian municipalities have been promoted by members of parliament throughout Canada as a means to demonstrate support for Ukraine. In early January 2024, council referred this correspondence to staff and directed staff to bring back a report on next steps regarding participating in an initiative to find a sister city in Ukraine, including resource implication and benefits. In April 2024, staff brought forward a report for council consideration on a potential sister city, the city of Nadvirna, Ukraine. The report outlined the next steps in regards to establishing Twin Cities Agreement, including the various cultural and social opportunities for Port Hope residents. Council considered this report and unanimously directed staff and the mayor to negotiate and enter into a twinning agreement between the municipality of Port Hope and the city of Nadvirna. And yesterday, I had the honor of signing that twinning agreement with Mayor Zinovy Andreyovich of the city of Nadvirna in Ivano-Frankivsk Oblast. And by formalizing our relationship, we're reaffirming council direction on this initiative. Third, last update, our strategic plan, community engagement is in progress, and we want your input. Share your thoughts by comparing our survey or visiting a community pop-up to help us shape Port Hope's future. Your feedback will guide our priorities and decision-making. Don't miss the opportunity to have your say. Visit porthope.ca/strategic plan for details on how to participate or reach out to any of your council members. So before we move on to question period, do council members have any updates that they wish to share around the table? Councillor Less.
Yes, what is the status of our child care center on Mill Street?
I will turn that over to our CAO.
I believe that everything was addressed. We were able to successfully relocate the families that needed to be moved due to the flooding that had occurred during the ice storm or shortly thereafter with the rainfall amounts. But I will follow up with the director for accuracy and provide additional information to council if there's anything that I'm missing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other updates that want to be shared around the table? Okay, then we'll move on to question period. It is now time for question period. Remember, the purpose of question period is to make inquiries of council members related to matters of municipal business. Please note, this is not meant to be an avenue to ask questions to staff. If you have questions specifically for your council members, you can ask them now. And I want to highlight that if your questions are operational in nature, they are probably best answered by a member of staff following the meeting. Contact information for our directors and senior staff are available by the door. And if you have operational questions, please ensure that you contact them, or we can certainly pass on your question to the appropriate member of staff. And when you do come up to the microphone, please make sure you identify your name and your address, and ensure that the purple button is pushed. But before we move on to that phase of the meeting, I'm going to ask whether councillors have any questions. Councillor Les has already kicked us off on that. Yes, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So I just have a question for my fellow councillors here. Most of the people out here are from Ward 2, and we talked about the fire department today, or the fire station. And I'm just curious if any of you have heard from Ward 1 residents and whether you've had these discussions about a potentially new fire station. It impacts all ratepayers and all homeowners and all residents. I did talk about this at the library board yesterday. I always give a council update, and no one there seemed aware of this at all. So I'm just curious if anybody up here has had conversations with people in the urban area about this.
Councillor Les.
Yeah, very limited, one or two people. It's not top of mind.
Councillor Adam.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And yes, I have spoken to many Ward 1 residents, a lot more Ward 2 residents than Ward 1, of course. And other than the overall concern of $11 million is $11 million, that's basically the only concerns I've heard.
Anyone else around the table? Councillor Clare.
I just, not to belabor the point, but I think it's been, every time it's been on our agenda, it's a Station 2 replacement project. So I think as far as urban residents, you wouldn't look at that and necessarily assume that it is bigger than that. And it is also a shift in the use of Station 1, and it's the investment in a more robust training facility and that. So I think it's kind of flying under the radar a bit.
And I've had a mix of communications around this, but I think actually going back to what Director Williams was saying about the fire earlier at the Beamish House is that the response had, all the units coming out to respond. So it should be part of the conversation right across the municipality moving forward. And there will be more discussions around that. Any other questions around the table? Okay, seeing none, we'll now open it up to the public. So as I mentioned, just please come up, introduce yourself, your name, your address, and make sure the button is turned on.
Hi, Ed White, Mill Street. Now, I may have heard this wrong due to the Hi. It's Ed White, yeah. Okay, so the presentation that I heard, I may have heard it wrong. Oddly enough, due to the usual dancing microphone issue. Let's get this fixed. Okay, I was going to ask if I did hear this right. It's concerning the current Station 2. And I'd like to ask the director a question if possible. I thought I heard him say that Station 2 is somehow contaminated, and I'm assuming that means with fire-related issues. I remember years ago when I went to, I used to do service work for the Wesleyville Fire Department, and they had special machinery, special appliances for cleaning their equipment, their bunker equipment, their face masks, and all that kind of stuff. I also thought I heard you say that there was a washing machine in the middle of the floor or something like that. Like, I'm not exactly sure what. I guess my question is, we're talking about replacing a fire station, and if there's a possibility that the equipment is contaminated, why don't we do a step and get the equipment safe so that the firefighters aren't going to sue us later if they get sick because the machinery's no good. I'm not sure whether I heard it right, but that's what I assumed.
So just to answer your question, I've done everything that I can within the confines of the current Fire Station 2 to keep our firefighters as safe as possible. The equipment that we have there, unfortunately, like I said, with the washing machine, that is the big extractor washing machine you saw in Wesleyville. But because of the constraints of our current Station 2, it's sitting in the middle of the lunchroom. So if you think about bringing in all that dirty gear through your lunchroom and washing it beside where you're having a coffee, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And when I say decontamination, it's not contaminated. It's the fact that they can't properly decontaminate after a fire, and therefore their gear and everything else within the station becomes contaminated as well. And there's just not mechanism to properly decontaminate it based on the nature of the construction, the equipment that is there. So hopefully that answers your
That's a big deal.
Yes, sir, it is.
Like, if these guys are going to get sick because they're washing their fire equipment in the lunchroom,
I couldn't.
I mean, that can't be right.
It's not.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't agree more. That's why I'm here. That's why I've been working on it for 3 years. I absolutely, unequivocally agree with you.
Do you have another question, Ed? Okay, thank you, Ed. Any other questions? Okay, yes, please come, and then we've got Louise.
If and when the fire hall is moved, some people will find they are now a longer distance from the fire hall than they used to be, which could quite possibly alter their insurance rates. Will they be compensated, or is it just their tough luck?
Thank you for that question. And actually, because we have the director here, and I know this is something that has come up over and over again during the consultations and conversations, can you please speak to this? And Councillor Less also. Maybe I'll go to Councillor Less first and then to the director.
The speaker behind you or the next speaker may have a suggestion on that.
Okay.
That would be Louise.
Oh, okay, so let's pause that for a moment, and I'll just let Director Williams also speak to it.
So in relation to your question about insurance, so multifaceted question. So if we're moving a station, again, not a manned station, so we don't have personnel there 24/7. We're moving an empty station from one location to another. So closer to where the firefighters are, but in relation to where your insurance question is, moving that station is also going to move the station closer to other people in Port Hope. So it may be moving a farther distance from some, but it's closer to others. So will it be removing the station from the 8-kilometer radius that is being established by some insurance companies? Potentially. Will it be benefiting other residents because now they're within 8 kilometers of the station? Potentially. So to look at it that way, again, that'd be a provision of a specific insurance company, and it may just be related to 8 kilometers of a full-time fire station, because being 8 kilometers from a unmanned station truly is no benefit. You want to be as close to the firefighters as you can, if that makes sense. So I don't know the provision of the exact insurance company that requires 8 kilometers, but if it does, then there may be some residents, I'd say a very small select group that may be impacted, but there also may be even more residents that benefit from the movement of the station.
Well, sorry, can you just press the button so we can hear you? Thank you. Sorry, the button's still not on. Just on the, there we
It
go.
is now.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not concerned about the people who are benefiting. That's great. But if you go and move think of a radius of 8 miles and you shift it, or 8 kilometers, and you go and shift it 3 kilometers south, that shifts a lot of people out of that distance area.
If you, so within, yep.
Well, sorry, you just need to press again. Sorry.
I would imagine that your 8 kilometers now is extending out into Lake Ontario versus extending out into as much of Ward 2.
The 8-kilometer radius in relation to insurance has nothing to do with fire service response. That's an insurance provision of some company that I'm not aware of.
I know on my insurance form, there is a question of the distance to the fire station.
I just want to ask a follow-up question to you, Director. Is it possible for us to be able to share with a potential insurer the information around speed versus location and responsiveness? That is, the location in relation to our volunteer firefighters and their ability to get to a station and respond, as opposed to, as you point out, the physical location of a place that does not have any permanent personnel in there 24/7.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to answer that, all that information, including a copy of the fire master plan, which actually outlines location and response time radiuses for our fire services, is a public document that's available on the Port Hope website. So if we look at that, you can review the fire master plan. It actually has all those timeline pieces of data. It also has information from the Fire Station 2 reports previously that I presented to council, which speaks to response times and location proximity. So all that information is available on the Port Hope website, either through the council meeting minutes and or through the fire master plan section. So, and just to speak to the movement of the station, while we may be moving the station from certain homes, we're going to be improving response times because we're moving the fire hall where the fire trucks are to closer, and it's only less than 2 kilometers closer to where the firefighters are. So that means the response times are going to increase. It's closer to the 401, it's closer to our main industry. It's going to benefit not only the Welcome and Ward 2 residents, because you're going to get a quicker response time, if that's what the question ultimately is, that there will be a quicker response time to Ward 2 than the current location.
I don't for a moment doubt that you've chosen the optimum location. The question keeps coming back, which hasn't really been quite answered, is what happens to the people who find that their insurance rates are now increased because the distance is greater?
And we have
My recollection is that it doesn't ask if it's manned or not. It asks for the distance. And when I renew my insurance, it would be, by the letter of the law, considered a substantial change.
The deputy mayor would like to weigh in on this, and yeah.
Thank you. I'm just looking at a map right now, and 8-kilometer radius from Garden Hill takes you down to Canton. So there would be an overlap. I think the only people that may lose out are the people on the far west, the difference between Toronto Road and Welcome, those few hundred feet on the far west end. But otherwise, you're overlapping the radius from Garden Hill by keeping it in Welcome. So from what I'm seeing, the radius doesn't really have a huge impact. I understand what you're saying, but if you actually get out the pencil and draw it, there's not very many people who fall outside of it.
Thank you, Vicky. I didn't realize how the geography of this worked. So in my case, I'm quite satisfied that I am covered twice within 8 kilometers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Hi, Louise Fletcher, Lakeshore Road. I have a question first about the Housing Task Force report. A lot of great information in there, and I was just wondering if that information is going to be shared with the county. I believe that you passed a motion to fund a study through the county for the looking at shared services amongst the municipalities, and it looks like there's already a lot of good work that's been done in here to be put into that report, so that's not going to be repeated in terms of planning services and whatnot.
Thank you for that question. I actually spoke to this earlier. I said that the report had come forward to the county council. It
Okay.
had, the recommended motion was that it was to be received for information, and we had a long dialogue that I initiated to ensure that not only the recommendations, but once they were prioritized, that they would be integrated into whatever council was doing in terms of its strategic planning and next steps. And the CAO had made a commitment that they were going to look at all of the recommendations once they were prioritized in order and ensure that it was informing county work moving forward. And yes, it's those kinds of resources, as well as what we saw earlier today on the climate plan, that would be part of conversations of how to optimize cooperation, collaboration, and reduce service redundancies in staff positions.
Great. And a second question I have is with respect to the OPG with the power generation coming to the community. And there's been a lot of discussion around the table today from many, many different perspectives. My question is about community consultation and the lack thereof going forward, or to this point. OPG has been out knocking on doors on Lakeshore Road, but they haven't hit all of us that are within a couple of kilometers radius. I was at another meeting and heard that these letters had been delivered. I never received one. And then there was questions that came up, and we realized that there's an overlap here between OPG and the municipality. And given that you got money back in January to start this process, and I know you've had a meeting and there's been a big report come forward about all the people that you need to hire to deal with this, I'd like to know when there is going to be community consultation for us along Lakeshore Road and the whole community. I think it's really ridiculous that a process has been started without a letter going to everybody in the municipality. I don't think somebody should be coming down and knocking on anybody's door without that mailing having gone out to everybody in the first instance. There's already a lot of questions and concerns about property values, about whether you can still farm on your property, the radius of expropriation or lands that can't be used. Some of those questions have already been answered to me by our MPP and some of the OPG people, but there are an awful lot of questions. This is going to be the biggest project ever done in this community. And there's a big, I know you've talked like 5 years out, we're years out from this, but there's a lot of questions and concerns already. So I would like to know, when are we getting that? I'm hearing meetings in April, but I just want you to know I don't know what it would cost, like $10,000 out of the $1 million you got already, to have mailed this out to everybody in the municipality so that we had an opportunity to have this information first and foremost before we start having the rumors, the innuendo, the, you know, all of the stuff that's going to come down the pipeline with respect to a big project like this.
Thank you for that question. And there's a couple of things that I'm going to say before I turn it over to the CIO. First of all, OPG has a separate process from what the municipal process is going to be. We have definitely raised with OPG, I've personally raised with OPG my concerns about the fact that a mailer did not go out to every single member of the municipality before the process of engagement started. I do know that the intention around the personal letter drop-offs was to show specific attention to those that would be most affected by the project, and the mailer to outline the entire roadmap that OPG was undertaking was going to be the second step, going out on April the 14th. I think it should have been in reverse. But it's not our process, it's the OPG-driven process. But I can assure you that they are taking a multi-layered approach, and there's going to be lots of opportunities for education and awareness. We will have a separate municipal community engagement process, and I'm going to turn it over to the CIO for some further information and comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So again, is this better? Okay. So I do understand, and I think I've heard as well about the level of frustration from that perspective with OPG and their process, and they are aware as well. I think the difficulty that we have with relation to the project thus far is that there is no project yet. So we're relying on sort of some guidance or requests as well from OPG as per them being allowed to initiate their process within the community first, while still maintaining our role in and having dialogue and finding a way to inform residents as to what the steps are going to be. The problem is there hasn't been a lot of information. We don't really have much more information as to what is occurring than what OPG is providing to the public right now. We will have, as the mayor stated, our own public engagement process. It was allocated in the last report to use the funds that we have now to start initiating those projects. What we've been asked by OPG is to allow them a little bit of leeway time in order for them to have their community pop-ups and meetings and start their initial communication request. And so we will be moving forward, and we're looking at a May timeline, May, early June, to do our own public process. And it will be a third party so that folks will feel as though they can raise their concerns without feeling like there's pressure, from the municipality to be happy or like any concerns, whether you think it's great, whether you think there's items that should be considered. And it will be separate from OPG as well, so that we're getting a fulsome picture so that the community has an opportunity to provide their honest feedback. So those things will be taking place. And again, as more information comes forward, we'll do our very best to sort of share any messaging that OPG is asking us to share, as well as working on our own process to ensure that the public is engaged and receives as much information as possible.
Okay, thanks. And OPG does have a website. I've looked at all of that. I've talked to our MPP. I've talked to people already along the way. It was just the timing and the fact that you're going to start dividing and conquering people if you have these little pop-ups and you're talking to these people. I understand they want to meet people where they are, but this was wrong that we didn't hear about this in the first instance, because it's just, I'm not opposed to that, the need that we have for electrification and energy and parallel, wind, solar energy, all of it, and that maybe the need for nuclear, but there's already a lot of questions. And this is protecting municipal property as well. And I'm hearing about potential industry in Wesleyville. There's a lot of planning issues out that way. We've talked about that before. Plan 173 lands, all of the preserved lands that was supposed to come down from the CNL project. So there's a lot of stuff there. I think you could have a very wholesome meeting with respect to all of that planning in that area. And there's a lot of implications for the community. So I do look forward to hearing from you guys.
And thank you for that. And again, we have given that feedback to OPG. The CAO has, I have, around the ordering in which they communicated what their roadmap was going to be. And so we definitely hear those concerns, and we will have a separate municipal process that will be ours to direct and ours to communicate. And it's not going to be a one-off. It's going to be an ongoing conversation with the community.
And just one last point in terms of as a rural resident, I absolutely support your efforts to get a new station. And I think that maybe a letter on municipal letterhead for anybody who has insurance issues might be something that you consider, because it's specifically in my policy a distance, and it doesn't say about service levels. But if you actually can write on letterhead that the service levels are far improved compared to what it was when it was whatever 6 kilometers, and now it's less than that, I think that might be a
Thank you, Louise, and that's definitely what I was asking the director for earlier today. So, yes.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Sculthorpe. I live at Willow Beach Road, Ward 2. I would like to echo everything that Louise has said, but I want to strongly advocate for every resident in this municipality to understand what OPG is proposing. They are proposing the largest nuclear station in the world. And what are they doing? They're going to go to float your fanny down the Ganney and maybe talk to some people. They're going to go to free swims and free skates. And I don't know about you, but when you go to a free swim, every parent is more concerned that their kids' heads are above water. They are not there to talk about the largest nuclear station in the world. Float your fanny down the Ganney, most of those people aren't even Port Hopers. You go to a free skate and you're hoping that your 12-year-old who's trying to pretend he's Wayne Gretzky isn't taking out somebody's 4-year-old that's trying to learn how to skate. Their approach to communication is disgusting. And every resident in this municipality deserves the respect to understand and hear what they are proposing. And I think it is really unfortunate that our council has not demanded from OPG that they give us a public forum where they discuss what is happening. And I am asking that this council tell OPG that the residents of this municipality demand a public forum to understand what they're doing.
Thank you for that comment. Again, I'm going to revert back to OPG has their process, has their roadmap. I know that we have shared or we've seen the communication from you directly to that team. We have a process. We can control a process. We can ensure that exactly what you're asking for is part of our community engagement process. We can certainly give all the feedback to OPG, and with all due respect, we have pushed back on them with the feedback from the community and the asks, and we're in early days, and let's give them an opportunity to respond to both what we are asking them, what the community is asking, and what we are going to design in terms of our community engagement so that those opportunities do present themselves.
I would like to say, number one, none of us are opposing this. We're just asking for information. But when NTEC REM came to this town wanting to build a large incinerator, our municipality took it upon themselves to put an information letter to every household in this municipality. Now, it was full of lies, which was most unfortunate. But our municipality put this information out to every resident in Port Hope. And yet you are choosing to not give this information to every resident in Port Hope. And I say once again, the largest nuclear station in the world is a huge deal. It's massive, and we all deserve to know about it.
And we absolutely hear you. We agree. And the scope of the project, regardless of what's being put out in the media, has not been agreed to and has not been determined. So we're still in the early stages. And we hear what you're saying. We hear what you're saying. So please give us an opportunity to put in place our own independent process. Give us the opportunity to share the feedback with OPG and give them a chance to respond to it. And we have a chance to move forward. It's still early days in the process.
I am asking you to respect us as taxpayers and residents of this municipality. And I believe, regardless of what OPG tells you they're going to do, this council needs to keep the public informed.
And we agree and we hear you. And that's why we will have an independent process that has nothing to do with OPG, separate from OPG. Councillor Clare.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I think I put in a call yesterday to Sarah Halara after seeing your correspondence, because one of the things that we get into a tricky situation is we have been informed by OPG about their consultation plans, but every email we had received up until this morning said confidential. So I put in a call to say, please let us know that we can share this information. And they did do that this morning. So we are now in a position to be able to publicly confirm and to respond to questions to say, there will be 4 information sessions in April on the 23rd, the 24th, and the 29th, which are those public forums I think that you're looking for. As the mayor confirmed, there will be a mail drop in every mailbox that drops the week of April 14th. And I did communicate to her that, that I think residents do look to us to be informed, and it's going to raise alarms if we don't look like we know what's happening. So she has committed to, apparently it's a rider at the top of the standard thing on all their emails. So she has committed to putting in writing, please share this with the community. And I expect that's going to be continuing moving forward.
So one last point. Gail, did you get the envelope in the mailbox? No. So Gail, my neighbor Gail and I, we live closer to this proposed project than many people who got an envelope. And I had this conversation with David Piccini, and he said, well, I'm sure they knocked on your door, but I guess you weren't home. No, because just about everybody who got the envelope was not home, and it was in their mailbox. So, OPGs, and I get you're not OPG, but what they're doing is really disrespectful to the residents of this municipality. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for, bringing forth those comments. And we have certainly shared the frustration and disappointment to date. Councillor Adam.
Yeah, I just want to go with what Councillor Clare was saying. I know that there was one PIC today in the library, as well as just reading it. So I'll just read it out loud just so that you can hear what the email does say. And a mass mailer sent via Canada Post to all postal codes in Port Hope is in progress and is set to be delivered beginning the week of April 14th. And then I'll also let you know that the series of the 4 information sessions are planned to take place April 23rd, 24th, and 29th. So just wanted to let you know about those just to make sure.
Can you
But
please
just
go
at
to
the mic, just the people at home can't hear.
the mic, and we're going to wrap up after.
So today's presentation, I gather, at the library, who put that on? How was anybody supposed to know about that? I had no idea about that. How did anybody know about that? And in the mail out, will it identify where these public meetings are going to be, or does someone have to go onto a website to find all this information?
I believe that yes is the answer. Exactly.
Great. And do we know who put on today's presentation?
The chamber was a part of that.
Yes, please come.
So when it comes to communicating with the public on getting their feedback or giving them any information, are any forms other than requiring an electronic device and the internet used to communicate and give information to the public and get their feedback?
Well, as Councillor Adam was saying, every household will get a mailer.
Not about OPG in general, sorry. to
Oh,
clarify.
in general. Is there a specific issue that you're wondering
As far
about?
as I can tell, the only communication when you're requesting feedback or communicating any changes to bylaws and otherwise is done electronically, which also requires the internet. I know several of my neighbors don't have the internet, so they don't get this information unless someone tells them or they go to the library to look it up. So how are you communicating with the public other than via requiring electronics and the internet?
Thank you for that question. This is obviously been an ongoing conversation for our communications team. When there are specific issues and outreaches that we do send out flyers, but I know there's been a lot of discussion around alternative modes of communicating with the public that don't have access to the internet or don't have access to those means that others have. And I know that there is consideration around posters and other paper forms of information sharing, but I think that I might just turn that over to the CAO because I know that's been part of more recent conversations.
Thank you. I do note there's been radio ads that have been put out as well. There's paper copies left in certain locations that we advertise if we're looking to collect data and folks don't have access to internet. We do provide paper copies when we're trying to gather information. Prime examples under the strategic plan right now, looking for comments from the public. Radio ads have gone out. We have pop-ups that are occurring in around town for people to provide feedback. We've posted, like I said, the radio ads, there's internet, there's social media, signage as well, electronic signage, as well as this road signage. So we are working very hard to ensure that we're able to gather that access from everyone in the community.
Thank you. Do you have
I was just
another
gonna
question?
say, I think more needs to be done to get that to the public versus requiring them to come find it or stumble across it in a Facebook post. Then like just, oh, we put it out there on Facebook and we have a sign up. Like if you're big issues, I think you need to be doing more to get information to the residents.
Thank you for that feedback. And I just do want to note that when we did have our budget consultation and survey, that members of this council were out in public canvassing people at the places that they will visit and frequent in both wards, in both rural and urban Port Hope. And that's why we were able to reach 10% of the voting population of Port Hope. So we did make that on the foot effort. Well, 10% is probably 10% more than this municipality has ever had in an engagement for a budget process. Yes.
Susan Smith Canton. I just want to confirm. It's on. Okay. Just to confirm, it's a 5-year span now from now when any agreement with Hydro is going to be fixed, right? Like a host agreement? I think I heard that.
It could, yes, it could take up to 5 years, but we will have more information about that exactly in the months to come and probably most likely by the fall.
Okay, but it's not guaranteed. They're just looking into it right now. Right?
Nothing is guaranteed.
Right. Okay, and on a second note, perhaps this is more into the county. Axle is the one that is providing the internet. They're installing the internet high speed, underground, the 5. Okay. I got my letter from Axle a week and a half ago. I had no idea who Axle was. Somebody even questioned who they were. I looked them up. They've got their own little comments about you can't find anything about them. Is there other companies that do it? Do I have an option? And just today, I received my letter from county. So, things don't, county should have come out first. Again.
Won't disagree with that.
Thanks. That's it.
Any last questions from the audience this evening? Okay, well, thank you very much for everybody being here. This concludes our business to be covered on today's agenda, and I'm in a position to adjourn the meeting of the Committee of the Whole at 9:31 p.m. Thank you again to everyone.